Joining me now to discuss today's ruling are my good friends and colleagues, the hardest bookings in America, Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell. Guys, thank you so much for being here on this momentous day. I am honored to have you on this program. Rachel, we haven't heard from you today. Lawrence, we haven't heard from you today. Rachel, I'll just let you get the first word here. But what was your reaction to what feels like a day of reckoning for Donald Trump?
It is a day of reckoning, almost literally, for sure. And it is also one of a number of really important court proceedings that are going to have really important consequences for him. And I feel like, once I read as much as I could of the ruling, a lot of it's dense, but a lot of it just makes sense. Once you understand exactly what he's ordering, once we saw Tish James's explanation of what happened, we saw Trump's reaction to it, I kind of sat back and I realized my biggest takeaway from this is that we need to protect the rule of law. that this is a candidate who is promising to, basically dismantle the American system of government. He has been raging against the judiciary and judges and juries and lawyers and plaintiffs and the whole system that is starting to hold him to account. He wants to get back into power, he's fully saying, because he essentially wants to dismantle the whole thing. And for all of the institutions that have failed against what Donald Trump is offering as an anti-democratic, small d democratic, essentially authoritarian candidate, the institution that has bent the least, that has stood up the best against his assault is the judicial branch of government, is the rule of law. And we need to protect it. We need to protect Judge Engoron. We need to protect his clerk. We need to protect Tish James. We need to protect E. Jean Carroll. We need to protect her lawyers. We need to protect the jurors. We need to protect Fani Willis. And we should talk about that because that's happening right now. But we need to protect Jack Smith. We need to protect Judge Cannon and Judge Chutkan. We need to protect the people who are manning the barricades on this one branch of government that's doing its job, despite what has been a really, really, I think, pointed assault from Trump and his supporters that is about to get way more intense.
Yeah. Lawrence, Rachel makes such an essential point about the branch of government that's holding democracy aloft. Yeah. I wonder what you thought of the ruling.
First of all, on your trip down Trump memory lane, I thought I had nothing to learn. Then came, I learned tonight, about the Trump urine test.
Yes, I'm
which
sorry.
Which I believe
I apologize.
My count is you mentioned them 3 times.
Yeah, well, and Trump and urine, I won't go further than that.
I had no idea he was that interested in
urine.
That. Well, yeah.
I'll say it. You don't have to.
Okay, great. So I just needed to
leave that right there.
I know.
It says a lot.
I know there were people in the audience who were still processing that, and I wanted to help them with it and move on to this. But so I have spent my entire adult life, professional life, in and out of courtrooms, following cases very closely. Some cases every single day in the courtroom. And there are some cases that are predictable. And so when you get to verdict, it doesn't feel quite so momentous or like something's changed because it was the only logical verdict. This Trump verdict today was the most predictable Trump verdict we will ever have because there was no jury. Juries still contain suspense. No jury, one fact finder, the judge. He made it very clear, because he's a rational human being, as the proceeding was going on, that all of this was outrageous, that Donald Trump's conduct in the room was outrageous, everything about it was outrageous. And so he returns this verdict that we could have kind of guessed the number within $10 million, because it was the number that kept being said. And yet, it truly is, it landed with me as something truly momentous. But here is this former president, current presidential candidate, on his way to the nomination, and he's now very clearly on his way to what could be functional bankruptcy for him. Because the lawsuits that I think people have left too far into the back of mind might actually be the most expensive things he's facing, which are the lawsuits by police officers in Washington, D.C. for what happened to them on January 6th. We saw what the defamation verdict was against Rudy Giuliani in Washington, D.C., over $100 million. Donald Trump could get hit with a verdict like this against an individual police officer in Washington, D.C. So he could be facing over $1 billion in these kinds of must-pay penalties.
Civil trials.
And which raises this other deep threat to the possibility of another Trump presidency, which is how will he pay these things? And the answer is Jared Kushner knows a guy.
Well, yes.
And the guy's in Saudi Arabia. And how many billion do you need?
Yeah, I mean, that raises a really important question, Rachel, which is it is not good for democracy. And Vox raises this point today. It's not good for democracy and transparency and rule of law for Donald Trump to face a really steep bill, not because he shouldn't have to face it, but because, as Lauren says, I mean, this leads you down inevitably the rabbit hole of which country is going to pay this tab effectively.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading that part of Judge Engoron's ruling today about how one of the restrictions here is that the Trump Organization can't get loans from any bank that is registered in New York. Well, in the normal scheme of things, when you cover financial trials and any trials that have that end up, for example, in SDNY, just because there's a financial institution involved, the shorthand that you do when covering these things is like, oh yeah, all financial institutions are registered to do business in New York. New York is the financial capital of the world, and so that's why they have jurisdiction over everything financial. But what Lawrence says is exactly right. Yeah, you know, I mean, it was a mysterious Russian bank that funded Marine Le Pen in her pseudo-fascist run at the French presidency, right? And it's inexplicably, it's Saudi Arabia that has given $2 billion to Jared Kushner for his great service in public life, which he now says he's not going to return to. So, I mean, the financial penalties here have incredible potential consequences in terms of the types of entanglements that Trump will have absolutely no problem dragging into the White House with him if he's reelected.
You know, you bring up, Lawrence, the civil fraud trial and the civil cases against Trump. And I have to ask you, we're going to continue this conversation. I'm just going to say it preemptively before anybody thinks I'm going to let you guys go. But Lawrence, you bring up the civil cases, and I wonder, you know, there's a huge question mark hanging over whether or not these federal criminal trials actually see the light of day this year before the election. If the American public only is able to hold Donald Trump accountable in a civil fashion, a la E. Jean Carroll, a la Letitia James, or the first responders and police officers at January 6th, is that sufficient? Is that enough?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's going to be the outcome for a couple of reasons. The first reason being, I don't believe Donald Trump is going to win the presidency. Therefore, with that belief, I don't particularly care when the trials happen. The federal trials. Everyone is worried about, you know, federal trials before election because they're afraid if you don't get those federal trials done before the election, then Donald Trump becomes president and he kills them. Well, under that theory, he kills them anyway because they would be on appeal. You know, if he was convicted, they'd be on appeal. But I don't believe he's going to be president. I believe you're going to see every one of these cases go all the way to their conclusions, and he will bear whatever criminal burden he has to bear as a convicted defendant in those cases. It's worth noting, none of them involve a mandatory minimum sentence. So the highest likelihood, which is, I know, dissatisfactory to a lot of people, but it's a version of hell for Trump, would be home confinement. You know, imagine spending the summer in Florida. That would be unbearable for him.
A fair point, my friend. And what if that you know, the pool floods the server room again? Goodness.